Welcome. It's so exciting to be here today. We've got another webinar for you. We love to do these webinars here at Renewed Vision so that we can empower you as our users to create better things than you've ever created before, do things smarter, easier, better for your volunteers and for your staff. We just love doing these webinars to help you in your situations and your productions. Today, we're going to talk about using Ableton to control ProPresenter so that your slides work every time, and how Ableton works a little bit and how to integrate those two. But today we actually have Will Doggett from Studio to Stage with us. Will, are you here with us?
I am
Awesome.
here. What's up, Cody?
How's it going?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. This is a little bit different than some of the past ones we've done. Previously, a few of the ones we did this past year were based on like the feature that had just released. This one's with you is going to be a little bit more involved in like what's a creative way you can use ProPresenter with another application together so that they work well. And then with this, it frees up your volunteers for a better solution, which I think is awesome. So today we're going to cover a little bit of why is Ableton Live a good choice for running your backing tracks, how to connect Ableton Live to ProPresenter 7. How to program out a song with your lyric cues, your MIDI notes, and then how that all adds your flexibility and freedom. Just like if you want to have spontaneous moments, how do you do that sort of thing? So we're going to cover a lot of that. Will is like the perfect person to talk to about this because of his background. And Will, I'd love to know like, what's your background? Where do you come from? Why are you doing this today?
Yeah, so I was first born a baby. And then after that, I quickly grew up and learned how to use Ableton Live. No, I think, for me, my experience with doing this really started, as far as I know, the day you guys released the very first MIDI module. I remember sitting in my office in Florida at the time and saw the like press release come out or whatever. And all of a sudden in my mind just instantly was like, I get what this can do. Like the possibilities of this are endless. And I was already into doing automation stuff and using Ableton Live for tracks. I was a Ableton Live certified trainer at that point. And so when I saw this feature, I just was like, this is going to be massive. So I sat in my office that day, made a video showing people how to do that, posted a set of MIDI cues to the internet, and gave that away for free. And I wish I knew at the time how to collect email addresses, because I would have more email addresses than Tim Ferriss at this point. But it was super fun. And so since then, just spent a lot of time with churches, like showing them how to do this. And I think you said it really well. It's like freeing volunteers up, and it's using a technical thing to lead worship. And that's something I'm super passionate about, which is cool.
Yeah, and one of the things that's cool about this is like I still think volunteers are valuable. Like I want to value a volunteer, but it gives us more opportunity for different serving opportunities, plus also the opportunity just to teach someone. I think if we can teach someone and lead them to learn something, so that maybe they can go and teach someone else, I think that's a beautiful thing. And so it gives them more of an opportunity to feel like they have ownership in something versus just clicking a slide over and over.
Yeah, man, I think that's huge. One of the questions, in fact, we just did an article that at the time of us recording this, we posted, I guess this was last week, on the Renewed Vision site. And one of the questions I get all the time is people say, but what about my volunteers? Like, isn't this going to get rid of all my volunteers? And I think you said it really well, which is just the fact that it's not going to get rid of your volunteers. It's going to open up lots of other possibilities for them, and free them up to do other things, which is really, really cool. Yeah.
Well, guys, as we go along through this webinar, I want you to know that we will accept any questions you have throughout the whole thing. I may throw them to Will as we're going. Will is actually going to be the one that's showing you how to do things. He's the expert in this, so I'm going to leave him to the technical stuff. I'm just here to help bring along the conversation, keep it going, and talk with you as the comments come in. So feel free to ask questions in the comments based on what he's doing, or if you have comments that you think may be relevant to MIDI and controlling ProPresenter and using Ableton. So yeah, it's gonna be good.
Sweet. Should we kick it off?
Yeah, let's do it.
Is it time?
Oh, wait. Before we do that, a lot of people are here probably going to have a question about a giveaway. So like, what is the giveaway? How is that happening?
Yeah, great question. So I am giving away, if you pre-registered for this webinar, I am giving away a 1-year free subscription to my website. So Cody mentioned that earlier. From studiotostage.com is the site. And I can show you this really quickly. And it's a online subscription training site. And so what I am going to do is for people that pre-registered, I'm going to pick one name, and at the very end of the webinar, I'm going to reveal grand reveal of the name, and you're going to get a free 1-year subscription to the site, which is super cool. So yeah, that's going to be fun. I think people will like that, but you got to stick around to the end for that for sure. So
you got to stick around.
That's right.
And Kira commented and she said, is this only helpful to us if we are using multi-tracks or backing tracks? I'll start with the answer for that one. I think that this is going to be helpful for more than that, just because it's going to talk about how you can use other software to control ProPresenter. And there's a lot of different ways you could use other software to control ProPresenter. So it may give you an idea of how to do that with MIDI, how to start using the MIDI integration. But on top of that, I think it's going to give you an idea of, if you don't use backing tracks, maybe why you should or how to. I think that this will cover some of that too. And so it'll be helpful even if you haven't used this before.
Yeah, that's great. And I think just to add to that, if we're talking about like pre-programming lyrics, the only qualification there is a click track, like something to keep everyone, together, whether you're using backing tracks or not. But yeah, like you said, I mean, MIDI is available to everything. So integrate anything and everything with ProPresenter, either sending or receiving MIDI, and you're going to have lots and lots of fun for sure.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool. Yeah. So hang around for the giveaway. We'll get to that. Like Cody mentioned, I'm going to kick us off and kind of take us through a couple steps here. At any point, if you have questions, throw those in the chat, and Cody will kindly interrupt me and let me get to those. Again, at any point, I don't mind being interrupted, so you guys throw those out. I think the first thing up front that I wanted to just mention, and this is kudos to Renewed Vision and ProPresenter for doing this, is I always start talking about what we need to make this happen. And in previous versions of ProPresenter, we needed something called the MIDI module. And that was an additional purchase, and you had to purchase it per computer, which it was still super affordable, and what it unlocked and gave you, I think made it worth it. But what was one of the things that's really cool with the addition of ProPresenter 7 is all of the modules that were included before are now included for free. So I just have ProPresenter 7 open up here. And if you go to under devices, you can see all the different devices that are available to you here. And so we're going to be specifically talking about the MIDI device to make this happen. But again, I think it's great that that ProPresenter Renewed Vision included this, so it's not an additional purchase. So starting at the top, first thing we need in order to control ProPresenter with MIDI, and again, like Cody said, I'm glad he mentioned this, we can control anything that sends MIDI can control ProPresenter. It's not just Ableton Live. It's not just for backing tracks. There's tons of possibilities, and we'll look at some of the things we can control via MIDI and some of the commands. And so there's tons and tons of possibilities there. One thing we need is a computer running ProPresenter, right? Hopefully that's obvious at this point. Again, like I mentioned, we will enable, and we'll talk through the process of how to do this in just a moment. We're going to enable this MIDI device, add that to ProPresenter so that we can send commands to control ProPresenter via MIDI. When we're talking about and in the context of using Ableton Live to control this, obviously we're going to need another computer running Ableton Live. So I've got Ableton Live pulled up over here. I have a backing track pulled up, and this is a song that my church recorded, I guess a year or so ago now. But again, you don't have to have backing tracks. This could be content you purchase from multitracks.com, from loopcommunity.com, from something you made. Maybe it's an original song your church has. But I've got a song pulled up that we can work with here. So we've got ProPresenter, we've got Ableton. It's fully possible to do this on the same machine, but I would highly, highly suggest you do this on separate machines. And here's kind of my thinking and my reasoning. Is one, if for some reason your tracks go down, and we could talk about solutions to like prevent that towards the end if you guys want to talk about that. But let's say for some reason my tracks rate goes down. If I'm running ProPresenter on the same machine, then that means my lyrics go down as well too. If my lyrics go down, and it's on the same machine, then my Ableton goes down. So if I separate these two machines, it's kind of this division of labor thing, and I can let one machine focus on ProPresenter, one machine focus on tracks. And most practically in a church situation, where our ProPresenter connection is, HDMI SDI connection, is likely going to be at a booth that's like far away from the stage. It's very likely it's not going to be in the same exact place that that Ableton is. So I've got two machines. I've got Ableton Live. I should mention too, for the sake of this, I am using Ableton Live 11 Suite. But you can do this with any version of Ableton Live. So I can't remember when, Cody, when you guys first released this, but from that version all the way to now, basically any version of Ableton will work. Intro, standard, suite, Ableton 9, 10, 11. At some point,
I didn't even know 11 was out. They come out with new versions all the time, I feel like.
Yeah, it's like constant updates, for sure.
Thanks for putting it on me when I was drinking my water.
Oh yeah, it was perfect transition. I'm the king of transitions, as you'll quickly learn. They just released 11 a couple weeks ago. But
okay.
I do this to show you guys, like, this is going to be archived for the rest of eternity. And 11 is the newest, but like, you don't have to have 11 to do this. You don't have to have Suite to do this. You don't even really have to have standard to do this. You could use Ableton Intro, any version.
And for going the other direction, if you were to control Ableton from ProPresenter, do you know if all the versions of Ableton, like the light version, allow control over MIDI as well?
Yeah, that's right. So any version of Ableton allows you to receive MIDI as well too, which is great.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. And that's probably a good thing to mention. This is something we talked about before. This webinar, I'm primarily going to talk about Ableton sending MIDI to control ProPresenter. But like Cody kind of mentioned there, it's fully possible to send MIDI from ProPresenter back to Ableton. And shout out to my superstar from Seat Stage student, Doug Laws. I don't know if Doug is on here. He probably is. But Doug is like the model example student. And something Doug does is he sends MIDI from Ableton, from Ableton to ProPresenter. QLab is thrown in there somewhere. I think he's got a couple instances of PVP as well. But then he also sends MIDI from ProPresenter to Ableton. So one of the things he does is, I think, start like a countdown video. And then at the end of that countdown video, it's going to send a MIDI note to start Ableton for the first
That's
song.
pretty cool.
Yeah. So tons of possibilities. And that's the beauty of MIDI. I mean, there's so many possibilities and there's so much we can do when we're using MIDI, which is great. Cool. So let's dig into it. So we talked about what we need. Again, a computer with Ableton Live, a computer with ProPresenter. Let's talk about how to get these machines connected. And I want to start over on my ProPresenter machine to start. And let me actually close this so that we can start fresh. Give me one moment here. Okay, great. So I've got ProPresenter 7 open. I'm running it on a Mac Mini M1, which surprisingly has run incredibly well. So again, kudos to Renewed Vision for developing software that works on a brand new platform and having no issues, which is great. So I am going to go into the preferences window of ProPresenter, which is Command, and we're going to go to the devices section here. Okay. Like I mentioned before, we used to have to use the MIDI module. Now this is included for free in ProPresenter 7. So I'm going to go to the devices tab. I'm going to hit this plus arrow here. And then you see all the different protocols we can control ProPresenter with or send from ProPresenter. Again, I'm going to choose just MIDI for the sake of this. I can name this. I'm going to just name it, for now, let's call it Ableton Connection. I'm going to do Auto Reconnect, which is super powerful. I have never ever changed hardware or behavior, so I'm just going to leave those just like this for now. And it's going to make me choose a source right now. So I'm going to just select, actually, I'm not going to choose a source. I'm going to just back out of this, but I've added this and I'm going to hit back now. Okay. One thing to mention with this is I have not defined, how ProPresenter is going to hear from Ableton yet. I just simply added that MIDI, device to ProPresenter. Okay. Now let's talk specifically about my setup, and then we could talk about how to get these two configured. So in my specific setup, I'm here in my home office. I've got Ableton on one computer. I've got ProPresenter on another computer. both of these are connected to my network. And so they're both connected via network cables into an Ethernet switch. Hopefully that terminology makes sense to you guys, but just Ethernet cables into a switch. I'm not doing this over Wi-Fi. That's one of the things I guess I should mention. This is possible to send MIDI over Wi-Fi, though I do not suggest it. It's a great way to do what I call a proof of concept, like to tell your, sit down with your worship pastor, to sit down with your pastor and say, hey, I'd really like to do this, but it's gonna mean we should upgrade to ProPresenter 7. Let me show you what it can do, show them over Wi-Fi, but then it should be hardwired, just to avoid connection issues. I promise you from personal experience, I always did this hardwired, and then one time I thought I was going to be slick and do it over Wi-Fi. The day after I was doing this was leaving to go teach at a worship conference and actually teach how to do this. And so I thought, I know how to do this. I'm like the king of ProPresenter Ableton stuff. And so, of course, pride comes before the fall, and it completely lost connection over Wi-Fi. But every time we were wired, we were perfectly fine. So please, please, please do this over a wired Ethernet connection. So I've got my two machines here, Ableton and ProPresenter. What I want to do is establish a connection between them. So again, they're on the same network, Ethernet cable into the same switch on the same network. And what I want to do is establish a connection, essentially a like virtual MIDI cable that's going to go from Ableton Live over to ProPresenter. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to use something called RTP MIDI. And if you're using a Mac, it's built into every single Mac for free using something called Network MIDI. And I'm going to show you how to set that up and enable that. If you're on a PC, there's some free solutions called RTP MIDI. If you just Google like RTP MIDI on Windows, you'll find some solutions for that. But what this essentially allows us to do is send MIDI over an Ethernet cable, and we can send and receive, which is really cool. It also allows us to go beyond that, the distance limit of MIDI, which I believe is 50 feet, and lets us go as far as we need to. I mean, you could send this thousands and thousands of feet. Another really cool thing, which I did when I was in Florida, is our church when I was there was multiple locations. Each one of our campuses was connected to the same network, essentially, even though they were, 30 minutes away if you were to drive by car. So because they were on the same network, I could literally send MIDI from my laptop to a ProPresenter machine at our Boca campus or at the Plantation campus or wherever, as long as they are on the same network and seen on the same network, which is really cool. So let's dig in. Let's talk about how to make this connection. I'm going to start over on my Ableton machine. That's going to be, I think, the best place to start. And we're going to set this up and get this enabled, and then we'll go to ProPresenter. Okay, so Ableton Live is opened up. And what I want to do is go over to something called Audio MIDI Setup. I think the best way to do this is to use Spotlight and just search for Audio MIDI Setup. And I'm going to hit Enter. Okay. By default, you're probably going to see something that looks like this when it opens up. So you're probably going to see this guy. Okay. Audio MIDI Setup is the place where you configure audio devices and MIDI devices. So if you see a audio window there when you first go to this location, that's perfectly fine. So what I want you to do is go up to the top to the window section. And for now, we're going to hide audio devices. We're going to go window and do show MIDI studio. Okay. So that's going to show our MIDI studio. And essentially what this is it's going to show us every MIDI device we've ever connected to our computer, which is kind of fun. You can like trace your history of MIDI devices you've purchased and plugged into your computer if you want. But that's what you're going to see here. Now, the next thing we need to do is go to our network browser. So I think the easiest way to get there is go to MIDI Studio. And then we're going to go down here and do Open MIDI Network Setup. Okay. Now, you're probably familiar with this. You may have seen this, seen me online talking about this before, to send MIDI between machines, to control main stage on another machine. There's tons of possibilities with this. Because again, essentially all we're doing is creating like a virtual cable between one computer and the next, which is great. So let's continue to stay over on our Ableton machine to get this started. And what I'm going to do is click this plus icon, and that's going to create a session. Okay. And then I'm going to go over here. I need to name this session locally. And this is something that a lot of people are confused by and they don't understand what this is. And I won't harp on this too long, but just so you know, a local name, whenever we see that, that is how is this connection going to show up on my local machine? So I'm on my Ableton computer, which is to the right of me here. When I'm on this computer and I open Ableton Live, what is that going to show up as? So it'll say network one and then some name. I would suggest naming it whatever it's going to, if that makes sense. So for instance, in this case, local name is going to be ProPresenter, okay? Because that's what it's going to. So in Ableton, I'll see network one ProPresenter. This is really, really important when you're doing multiple network sessions. Maybe you're sending MIDI to ProPresenter, maybe you're sending MIDI to Jan's Vista, maybe you're sending MIDI to QLab. You should have a separate network session for each one of those. And it will be really important in your Ableton MIDI preferences to label it so that you know which one is which, right? So this is my ProPresenter one, this is QLab, this is whatever. Okay, so let's go back over here. Let's finish this setup up. So what I'm gonna do is I've got my session created. I've added my local name. Bonjour name is how is this gonna show up on the network? So over on my ProPresenter machine, when I go there, how's this going to show up on my ProPresenter machine? I'm going to just do this in inverse. On my ProPresenter machine, I want to name it Ableton, so that this is so that on ProPresenter, and you'll see this in a second, it's going to show up as Ableton. On Ableton, it's going to show up as ProPresenter. Okay, so we've got that set up. Do not do anything with live routings. This is where people shoot themselves in the foot. I see a lot of people create an IAC driver, then route the IAC driver here and back. There's no reason to do that. Leave that alone. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. But the most important thing after we do this is to go over to who may connect to me and change it from only computers in my directory to anyone. Excuse me. So who may connect to me? Anyone. We need a bonjour name, which is how it's going to show up on the network, local name, and then I'm going to hit enabled, and this is going to enable this connection, okay? We don't see anything listed in the directory here yet, and that's perfectly fine because we haven't made our way over to ProPresenter, but let me set this up over on the ProPresenter machine, and you'll see what this looks like. So I'm going to leave Ableton open. Over on the ProPresenter machine, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to Spotlight, and then I'm going to search for audio MIDI. Okay. I'm going to pull that up. Again, you see this time the audio device pulled up. So we're going to go to Window, and we want to do Show MIDI Studio. Okay. Then we're going to go up to the MIDI Studio option here, and we're going to do Open MIDI Network Setup. Okay. Now what's cool is you could see already Ableton is showing up in the directory. And the reason that I have that name there, the reason that I see Ableton listed in there is because of how I named that other network session, right? How did I want that connection to show up on the network? I wanted it to say Ableton. That's why I see that here, okay? So I'm gonna really quickly do this. I'm gonna press plus to create a session. Local name, I'm gonna do the inverse of what I did there. So I'm gonna say Ableton. Bonjour name is how I want this to show up on the network. So I'm gonna do ProPresenter. Again, leave live routings alone. Who may connect to me? Anyone. And then now let's enable this, and this is going to show up on our network. Okay. So now let me show you side by side of both of these guys. It's going to be a little hard to see, but what you can see on both of these machines, let me take you over to Ableton. You can see over on my Ableton machine in the directory, it says ProPresenter, and over on my ProPresenter machine in the directory, it says Ableton. Okay. So at this point, what I've essentially done is I've created this cable. Now I need to just plug the cable into both pieces of software. Okay, super easy to do. I have a preference and a bias towards Ableton. Sorry, Cody. So I'm going to start on the Ableton machine. So let's go over here. I'm going to click directory where it says ProPresenter, and I'm going to hit connect. Okay. And you should almost immediately see that connect. And so in this ProPresenter connection, participants is ProPresenter. Let's take you back over to our ProPresenter machine. Now you'll see participants is Ableton. So this is just a great like visual indicator that, hey, both of these machines are connected. Everything is looking right. The connection is the way it should be. Okay. Any questions up to this point, Cody, that have come in from anybody?
Yeah, someone asked if you could use Ableton on Mac and ProPresenter on PC and if connection would work.
Yeah, you could. The one question I have that I'm not sure of, and I don't know if you know this, Cody, is if the MIDI device is available for Windows PC in ProPresenter.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Then,
Yeah, if you use the Tobias RTP MIDI, that's his Windows version. That'll work for you to do both platforms.
Sweet. Yeah, and that's one of the great things about MIDI is this doesn't have to be Ableton Live. You could use QLab and send MIDI from QLab, send MIDI from anything, Windows, PC, to a Mac machine back and forth, which is super cool.
And one note I have is like, as we're doing this setup and we're looking at this, and this is with anything advanced, like this is an advanced thing. Advanced things are typically harder on the setup side.
Yeah.
But then once you have it set up, it's really easy. So like you're not gonna have to do all this setup stuff that he's walking through with the two screens on both different softwares, creating a new network device and all of that every time. You're just doing it the one time to set it up on your devices.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's a philosophy I take in how I program tracks, how I teach students to use Ableton is the first time you do something, it's going to take forever. And then the next time you do it, it's going to take a little less time, next time. And so, yeah, this is a one-time thing. Every time you get a new machine, you'll have to set this up and enable it. And I'll even show you if you stick around. And if I remember, maybe Cody or someone in the chat can remind me, I'll show you a hardware box that you can buy. We'll save this for later. I'll show you a hardware box you could buy that will automatically connect both machines whenever they turn on, and you never have to create a new session. But stay tuned for that. We'll save that for later. So, okay, cool. So we've got the connection between these machines going. We've established it. I kind of hit connect. Now let me go into Ableton and show you what I need to enable, go into ProPresenter, and then we're almost there. Like this may feel like a lot, but like we're almost at the point where we're ready to start programming. There's not a whole lot left to do. So again, let's start over on the Ableton side. With this connection made, I'm gonna get out of network and audio MIDI setup. I can close that. I don't need to be back over here. I'm gonna go into Ableton Live. I'm gonna go to preferences, which is also command comma, which is a nice easy thing to remember. So command comma, I'm going to go to the link tempo MIDI window. And I just need to confirm that on the outside of this, so the output side of this, if I scroll down, you'll see out network ProPresenter. I've got track enabled right here. So there's a bunch of different options as long as track is enabled on the output right here. And you could see where we named this network ProPresenter. Right, that was the reason we made that name change earlier, just to make sure that we see what that is there. So over on the Ableton side, we're good. One thing I'll mention here, just because we're at this section, but we'll come back to this, is the next thing I'm going to show you really quick is if I create a MIDI track, the one setting you have to make sure is always set correctly on that MIDI track to make this work. So let me show you really quick what I'm talking about. I'm going to go up here to create. And I'm going to do insert MIDI track. And I just need to make sure that the output of my MIDI track is set to that network session port that I created. Okay. So this is just defining what output do I want this to be. And if I go here, see where it says network ProPresenter, I'm going to select that. And what that means is any MIDI clips that are loaded onto this track are going to go out of this track to network ProPresenter. That's going to carry over to my ProPresenter machine, that network connection, and then we're going to spit that into ProPresenter. So now let's go over to ProPresenter because we need to make that connection, okay? So we'll go over to ProPresenter, and I'm going to close this guy. If you remember earlier where I added this Ableton connection, now I'm going to go back into settings, and if you look here, we now magically have this brand new setting where it says session 1. This is that port we created. So I'm just telling ProPresenter, hey, when you're looking for MIDI information, I want you to pull MIDI information from this port here, okay? And that's really almost it. So as long as you choose the correct port here, and I should mention, just because we talked about this earlier, if you were going to send MIDI from ProPresenter back to Ableton, that's where right here under Destinations Session 1, that's where you would enable that. That's going to say, hey, I want to send MIDI from ProPresenter through the Session 1 port back over to Ableton. That's where we'd make that change there.
I believe that if it's been a few minutes, if you restart ProPresenter, it'll show the correct network name there too, instead of just Session 1.
Okay. Yeah, and this is whenever I teach, I'm kind of breaking some of the cardinal rules. Like I would not, and this is, you got to stop me, Cody, if I go too far on my soapbox here. But one of my pet peeves is when people treat Ableton Live not like it's an instrument, like it's just a program on a computer, and they show up to sound check and they like build their set really quick and they route their audio, and the whole band's like sitting around waiting for them to get things done. It's like, that's your instrument. That's like showing up to rehearsal without tuning your guitar, starting the song, and then being like, hold on 1 second, you know? So yeah, this is stuff I would do way in advance. I would probably leave ProPresenter closed, set this connection, and then reopen, and we'd see that name, like Cody said. Yeah, good point, Cody. So let me get back over to ProPresenter here real quick. We've enabled this. Something really important to enable that's going to save you tons and tons of time is this auto reconnect button, that if for some reason you lose connection or shut down your machine, turn back on, as long as you reconnect over an audio MIDI network, then ProPresenter is automatically going to connect here to the network settings, which is great. And then let me show you the most important part. I can speak from experience because I may or may not have done a webinar when ProPresenter 7 was first released and could not get it to work and went like 3 minutes and then realized I forgot the most important setting, which if we hit back here, see this giant connect button? We want to make sure that we have connected here. Otherwise, it will not be connected. It's very appropriately named. The developers did a fantastic job with this. Connect. Okay, so right now what we've got our connection made, and let me just walk you back through this. So we've got our connection made both on Ableton Live and ProPresenter. Over in Ableton, I've got a MIDI track again loaded in here. I have no notes loaded in yet, which is fine, but I've got a MIDI track loaded in here that's routed to network session 1. And then again, we are over in ProPresenter. Over on the ProPresenter side, I've made my connection. I'll go back in here to show you. We're connected to session 1. Everything looks good there. I remembered the very important connect button. And at this point, we're pretty much ready to go. Now, Cody, any questions here before I dive into the MIDI map section? Excuse me.
Yeah, so can you go back to your ProPresenter window and then show the devices there?
Yeah.
So someone was saying that they didn't see any devices. You got to make sure you click that plus button down at the bottom. That's where you can add MIDI. So if you're just joining in with us, make sure when you open up the ProPresenter preferences and then you go to devices here, then you just got to click that plus button down at the bottom of that window. That's where your devices will show up.
Yep. And Command comma gets us into preferences. Then we go to devices tab and then that plus button to get there. Yeah. Good question.
Let's see. Someone asked, can I have ProPresenter send a cue to Ableton to start the session?
Yeah.
And you mentioned this earlier that you have someone that's in your class that's doing that. Right?
Yeah. So Doug Laws is from CSH student, and he does that. The example I gave, which I'm pretty sure is what he does, is countdown video in ProPresenter. At the end of the ProPresenter, the countdown video, it sends a MIDI note to Ableton. Now that's out of the scope of what we're doing, out of the scope of what we're talking about today. But yeah, if you're going to do that, the one thing here is make sure in settings we've enabled the destination to be whatever port we need. And then I've said it's out of the scope, but I was about to show you how to do it. But yeah, basically that's 100% possible. Whoever asked that question. Yeah. Cool. So let me back out of this guy. And let me show you and talk you through kind of the secret sauce, the thing that makes this happen. Don't forget that connect button, boys and girls. Okay, so let's hit MIDI map. And I don't want to spend too much time here, but I just want to show you kind of what this screen is. One of the things that drives some people crazy about the way I teach is I'm really passionate about explaining why, not just how. We 100% live in a YouTube how, generation. Just show me how to do it. I'm really passionate about why, so bear with me. I'm not going to take too long, but I want to explain when you're dragging these MIDI cues in, like what the heck is happening, and it all has to do with this screen here. So if I hit MIDI map, excuse me, this is going to open up, and this is going to show me all the different commands that I can control via MIDI, which there are a lot of them. We're primarily going to deal with the commands that have to do with basically controlling lyrics. or controlling slides, but there's so many things we can do. So we have clear commands. We can clear all, slide, blah, 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 blah. We have this brand new command to ProPresenter 7, which is a clear messages command, which is great. Then we have video controls. We can go to the beginning of a video, play, pause, play, and then pause there. And play, pause is like a toggle. We have presentation actions, which we can choose next playlist item, previous playlist, next slide, previous slide. All these commands up top, let me mention two things. All these commands up top are accessed by a single MIDI note. So what this essentially means, if you look right here, note 0, C-2, the folks at Renewed Vision were kind enough to follow my prompting when I made that first video and made this note 0. Now we start at note 0 here, C-2, which matches Ableton Live. Again, thank you, Renewed Vision, for updating that. When I send note 0 from Ableton Live, it's just going to clear all, right? If I send note D#2 from Ableton Live, it's going to clear all my props. If I send note E-2, it's going to clear audio, okay? I'm stressing that because what happens down here is a little different, and we'll get to that in just a moment. One other thing I want to point out is these presentation actions. We could 100% control lyrics and control our slides with these, right? See how it says next slide, previous slide, next playlist item, previous playlist item. We could 100% use these commands. I'm not a big fan of using those commands typically for lyrics, and the reason is they are relative commands. And what that means is this next slide command, whatever is next is highly dependent on what came before it, right? And it's like, wow, what a great deep philosophical thought you have there, Will. But my next slide is not always going to be the same thing. Next slide is dependent on what came before. So what ends up happening, and I've seen this happen so many times before, is people get off tracks or you skip a song in your set, and suddenly that next playlist command, suddenly this next slide command, previous slide command, things are just way off. And they go, what in the world? What happened? ProPresenter crashed. It messed up. No, ProPresenter didn't crash. It didn't mess up. You told it to do what it was doing, and it just followed your command, which is next. But you skipped where the previous command was, right? Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. So what I'm really thankful Renewed Vision gave us was not just relative commands, but absolute commands, okay? And the absolute command is, I want to go to playlist 1, I want to go to song 3, and I want to go to slide 4. And with these 3 commands, select playlist item, and trigger slide, I have absolute control over each of those items, okay? Now, if you look at this, though, there's only one MIDI note listed at each of these. F-1 is select playlist, F#-1 is select playlist item, G-1 is trigger slide. So how in the world are we going to get to the point where, if we're doing all that, how in the world are we going to get to the point where I can say a specific command? Well, that's where this little section right here that says select by index comes into play. Index basically is velocity. And if you know anything about MIDI, velocity is how hard or soft we play a note. From Ableton Live, I can send all of the velocities, every single velocity that's available to me, 0 to 127. And that velocity is going to correspond to whatever that note is. So let me take you back over here. Select playlist. If I send note F-1, and this is the participatory portion of this webinar. So if you're watching live, join in with me here. If I send note F-1 and I send velocity 3, then what playlist do you think it's going to pull up? It's going to pull up playlist 3, okay? If I send note F#-1 velocity 2, which song do you think it's going to pull up? Song 2. And if I send G-1 slide 45 or velocity 45, what slide do you think it's going to pull up? Slide 45, okay? So what's important to note here is that velocity plus note allows us to trigger something absolutely, right? When I send that note with that velocity, it's going to pull up automatically. Now, that's a lot to know, and that's a lot to manage. I've seen a few people that want to do this with like a keyboard, and they want to play like the exact velocity to get it right. And I'm like, man, that's going to take forever. Please don't do that. I've seen people go into Ableton Live and draw little MIDI notes to try to get this right every single time. Please don't do that. Save yourself some time. Save yourself lots and lots of time, in fact, and download a ProPresenter MIDI cues file. Now, because you're on the webinar and you're very nice people, I have set up a link from studiotostage.com/ProPresenter That's from studio2stage.com/ProPresenter. And if you go to that link, what you're going to be able to get is you're going to be able to get the cues file I'm about to walk you through completely for free for ProPresenter 7. And what this cues file is going to give you, it's going to give you access to every single one of these commands without you having to do any work, right? This is like a worship leader's dream. I want to be able to do something cool without any work, right? It's a production manager's dream. I want to be able to do something cool without talking to anyone, completely wearing black, sitting in the back of the room and doing no work. It's every production manager's dream. So from studiostage.com/ProPresenter, what that's going to get you is this cues file. Now, again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but essentially what this cues file does, and you're going to start to see a correlation here. I'll put both these up side by side in just a moment. What you're going to see is a correlation between these MIDI notes, these MIDI clips here, and those commands over in ProPresenter. So let me show you both of these guys. So when I go to this clear all command over in ProPresenter, that is cueing this clear all command, this clear all clip in Ableton. That's triggering this clear all command in ProPresenter. Okay. And so what's really cool about this cues file, the free file, again, available from studiostage.com/ProPresenter. It's where you want to go to get that. This cues file has basically everything you need in it. Now it's going to go and it's going to stop at slide 30. And so if you're a student or you want to purchase the full files, you can do that on the site. But this file is going to give you every single command you need. Okay. Now, what I want to talk about next, and again, Cody, let me know if there's any questions here, but what I want to talk about next is how do we translate this technical stuff into the creative thing? How do we use these slides to create perfect lyrics every time without the fuss, without the stress? But before I do that, Cody, any questions that have come up so far?
People are just talking a lot about networking and like if you had a VLAN, like how you would do it that way. Like if they communicate across VLANs, I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, I'm not smart enough to know a lot of that technical stuff. What I will say is at our church in Austin, one of our campuses at least, we do have a VLAN set up there, and we were able to do this from one to the other. It may be worth in a situation like that looking at one of these hardware boxes that I'll mention at the end of the webinar that kind of takes things off the network but allows you to do stuff through that, which might be beneficial. But one of the things that I will mention with that, though, is any networking IT person at your church is going to know the answer to that, because that network MIDI thing is pretty like standard IT-ish stuff, and they'll know how to port forward if you need to. I think it's port 5004 or whatever. Like, they'll get all that stuff. You just kind of get there with them, spend some time. They'll be able to set it up for you and get it going for sure. Sweet. Okay, so let's get into what the heck this cues file is, how to use it, and how to basically put this into action. So what I want to do, I'm going to open up an Ableton Live file. Again, this is a file that my church did, I guess about 1.5 years ago. The song is called You Keep Coming After Me. So I'm going to load this file up. I'm going to delete that MIDI track that we added. Essentially what this file has, and this is a little bit, a little peek behind the curtain of the secret sauce of using Ableton in a way that isn't going to take you hours and hours to use tracks. And that's one of the things I'm super passionate about. Is I don't care how cool your technology is and all that stuff. If you spend an entire day trying to get it prepped and ready to go, instead of spending a Saturday with your family, I don't care what you're doing. It's not cool, and it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. So I want to do this in a way that doesn't take hours is essentially kind of my process. So I have tracks formatted in a specific way. If anyone has questions about that at the end, we could talk about it. But then what I have is all my stems for the song loaded in here. Okay. I have some specific things and ways I format stuff, but what I essentially want to do, one of the secrets to programming lyrics really quickly in ProPresenter that I've found throughout the years is, if at all possible, include the original track, the original song, because what you're going to be able to do is program to a file with the lyrics, which is going to make it way easier to program to than you trying to think in your mind, what are the lyrics here? How does this go? Is this one slide or two slides? Okay. So I've got this file pulled up. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Live's browser, which is over to the left-hand side of Ableton Live. I'm going to add my ProPresenter MIDI cues file here to the browser. So I'm going to go to Add Folder. I'm going to go to desktop. I have a ProP webinar folder. I have this free cues file. I'm going to hit open, and then that's going to add this over here. And what's really cool about this is I can access all my commands directly from the browser. Okay. So that right there, that's worth the price of admission itself, ladies and gentlemen, is
that's awesome.
Yeah. Adding things to the Finder is going to save you so much time. Okay. Now the other thing I'm going to do, let's jump over to ProPresenter really quick. To make this easy on yourself, if at all possible, open up the ProPresenter file that you're using for that song. Okay. So I've got this song loaded in over in ProPresenter here. You keep coming after me. I've got all my lyrics ready to go. One of, I think, the important things to do is before you start programming, make your like line breaks. Decide, are we doing 2 lines per slide? Are we chopping things up? Because it's going to be really important. 2 things are really important here. Your slides are pre-formatted before you program. And the reason is if I say send slide 2, but some genius went in and decided, you know what, let's combine slide 2 and 3. And then I send slide 3, it's actually going to trigger this one, right? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but make sure all of this stuff is correct. Another pro tip, as I learned while we were recording this song, is make sure you have your arrangements correct. If you're going to use the arrangement stuff built into ProPresenter, and make sure you have that queued up, because that's going to change your slide order as well. Okay. One of the, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, for you, have you typically used an arrangement and built it out for that whole arrangement versus like just doing the next slide kind of idea?
So I typically, I'll mention 2 thoughts. One, I personally typically do not use an arrangement. So if I was back, just to show people what I'm talking about, if I was back in ProPresenter, instead of doing the default arrangement here, I would just stay on master, and then I would build all my song sections out. And what's cool is then I will drop in cues for my verse. And if I repeat my verse again, I just copy those cues in Ableton and move them to the second verse. If I do the chorus again, I just copy those cues in Ableton and move them to the second chorus again. The one downside to that though, which I have seen people run into, is it's going to throw off stage display, because you're going to get to the end of the chorus. And if you have stage display set up to show the next line, then it's going to show like the bridge when it's supposed to be the verse. Now, if your worship leaders are complete robots, which we've all had those Sundays where we're complete robots and we're Ron Burgundy, you know, reading the teleprompter is exactly as written, then you're probably going to want to use an arrangement, but you can save lots of time by just not using an arrangement and dropping cues in, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Cool.
Yeah, and I would say, especially with the new changes that have come to the stage display and the ability to have like where it says, this is the section that's coming up next, not even just the words. Before you would see like, you know, current words, next words, but now you can have like current group, next group. So it could say it's coming to the chorus next, but then all of a sudden you're actually going to the verse. That could get confusing.
Oh yeah.
So I know so for me, like I like to for when I'm doing MIDI, I like to program out the whole arrangement. So I typically do it based on like the original version of the song, because I know that our church is going to follow the original version of the song. We may cut a chorus or add on something, but that's not like 80% of the song is going to be correct that way, at least.
Yeah.
So I'll program out the whole thing. It's a lot of MIDI notes to program out, but then once you do it the first time, you don't have to program out again, which is nice.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things, like you said, is once you do this for this Ableton Live file, you never have to do it again. And then what's really cool, and I don't want to gloss over what you just said, so I'm going to try to repeat it.
Okay.
I'm from North Carolina, so let me put it in terms us North Carolinians could understand. If I keep Ableton Live and I program Ableton Live to the original version, and I load the original version in ProPresenter, and I never touch ProPresenter, I never change ProPresenter, but I go into Ableton Live and I delete a chorus or I duplicate a chorus, guess what? That Ableton, all those slides are going to follow those changes I made in Ableton, because I never change slide order in ProPresenter. I just change what MIDI cue is coming next or before it. And so what's amazing about this, and I'll throw some pointers out at the end when we get here if people want this, but what's amazing about this is you really truly, and this isn't just a marketing tagline, you can have complete freedom and flexibility even when you're doing automation stuff. If you program your Ableton Live file correctly, do some special things, special sauce in there, but you can have complete freedom and flexibility so that I can repeat a section. It's going to send that MIDI cue again to ProPresenter, and that section is going to repeat. I can edit an arrangement and it's going to change that arrangement, and I don't have to go do any work in ProPresenter. And it's no more of those like trying to find how to route your MD mic to the booth so that the ProPresenter volunteer can hear it, or like very actively doing this to keep going, or like weird signals up to the booth. I just make those changes in Ableton and it happens automatically in ProPresenter, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Sweet. Okay, so let's lay some cues in again. Let's get to kind of making the magic happen, so to speak. So again, just to stress the point, over in ProPresenter, I've got my song pulled up. I do have a playlist built that appropriately is titled ProP Webinar. And I have 2 songs in here. It's the world's shortest worship set. 2 songs, and they're both already formatted, default arrangement. And actually, just for the sake of time, I'm going to change this back to master as well too. So I just have one set of these cues. But again, following what Cody said, you're likely and probably going to want to build your arrangement out, select it here or whatever, and make sure again, the point is, over stress this, make sure whatever you program to in ProPresenter is like the final destination, right? So you save yourself some work. Okay, back over in Ableton, I've got my song pulled up. Like I mentioned, something that's really going to help save time is having a original track loaded in, having that track warped to the click, which is incredibly easy to do, and load that in, and then it's dropped right in with my stems and synced up perfectly. Now, I'm going to pray that the Facebook gods don't take our stream down because I play a song, but we'll see. So what I'm going to do is just press play on this for a second.
Intro, 2, 3, 4. Verse 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so there's my first lyric. So here's what I want to do to start with. I'm going to start laying in some cues. So I'm going to go over to the Finder. Our browser, excuse me. I'm going to click down here to ProPresenter. First thing I need to do is tell it what playlist I want it to use. So let's go to ProPresenter. The playlist we're using, I only really have one playlist here, but it's going to be playlist 1. Okay, so back over to Ableton, I'm going to go to select playlist commands. Look at all these different commands I have access to directly. Select playlist 1. I'm going to drag this in at the top of the song. Okay, so next thing I needed to tell ProPresenter is select playlist item. And this is something that throws people off, but it's pretty simple to understand. It's whatever item in the playlist, which if you're just doing songs, it's like whatever song it is. So select playlist item. Another way to see it would be like, what song do you want to do? Okay, so back over in ProPresenter, let's see what song we want to do. You keep coming after me as song 1. Okay, so playlist 1, playlist item 1. Okay, so back over in Ableton, I'm going to take select playlist item, and I'm going to drop select playlist item 1 cue into my Ableton set. And one thing I'm going to do that's particular to me, this is what I call a Will Dog at best practice, you don't have to do this, is I'm going to put it in a separate MIDI track, and I'm going to just offset it so that these cues don't happen at the same time. Okay, so separate MIDI track, and they don't happen at the same time. Now I'm going to do one more thing, and then we're going to start cooking on this, and the rest is pretty simple. I need to make sure I've routed my outputs for both of these tracks. So both of these, if you remember what I was talking about before, I need to go to Network, ProPresenter, and make sure that both of these notes are sending over to ProPresenter. So this MIDI note is going to this track. This track is going to Network, ProPresenter, which is then going over to Network, ProPresenter over on this machine, which is then going into ProPresenter. That's how that information is getting there. So now if I start to drop slides in, okay, and we'll just drop a few in here. Trigger slide, slide 1. So if you look at it over in ProPresenter, my very first slide is the first line of this, when my heart is low and I cry for help. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Ableton, and I'm going to take slide 1. Again, Will Dog at best practice. I'm going to place this in a separate track, and I'll talk about why in a moment. And then I want to get this time just right. This is one of the best reasons I think for doing this automation is you can get your lyrics timed perfectly. You don't have to, which hopefully you're not yelling, but you don't have to yell at a volunteer and say, trigger them early, not while I sing them. You could skip around the song, they're going to follow. We can get this perfect every single time in this step, okay, in this stage. So I'm going to drop this in. I'm going to go back and listen to the song.
Verse 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so I basically have this happening a bar before when the lyric comes in. I typically do this. I right click in Ableton on the grid here. I change it from fixed grid. I have it set to 1 bar. I'll typically set this to quarter notes because I've found it depends on your scenario. Typically, most lyrics I want a couple quarter notes, eighth note, half note, whatever away from when it starts. So
Verse.
right, there's my lyric. This is probably a little early, so we're going to move this to here. Another pro tip, if you want to get this lyric just right, you can hold Command while you drag, and that's going to let you drag off of the grid. So it doesn't have to be tied
Nice.
it doesn't have to be tied to a note value. So if you're like, oh, I just need it right there, hold Command, drag, and then you'll get that right where you need it. Okay. So now I'm going to listen, and then I'll show you ProPresenter in just a second.
Verse 2, 3, 4.
When my heart is low and I cry for help.
Now, another pro tip, start to do math. And worship music, much like other popular music, is very formulaic. So you can almost go every 4 bars and jump back a half note from where the lyric starts and kind of guess that you're in the right place. So I'm going to drop slide cue 2 in here.
Will you hear me? And you keep coming after me.
Okay, so that's that slide 2. Now, one thing I can do, and then I'll show you how this works and show you the connection. One thing I like doing when I'm doing this is taking a clear slide or clear all command. And guess what? I'm going to put this in its own track. And again, we'll talk about why to do that in a second. And I'm going to clear my slide right when Jaleesa, who's the singer for this, ends that final phrase. Okay.
You keep coming after me.
So what we end up with is basically our slides drop down, if that makes sense. Our slides drop down rhythmically in time, like right when they finish the phrase, our lyrics fade and our background stays. That could also be a clear all command if you don't have backgrounds, whatever you want to do there. One other final thing I need to do here, and then I'll show you what this looks like over in ProPresenter, and then we'll take some questions and talk about some other fun things. Make sure these are also routed to network ProPresenter. Okay, so they're all routed to the same network, same connection. Now with this programmed in, let's go over to ProPresenter. Let's try to stump ProPresenter. Okay, let's see if we can really mess it up here. Let's add a couple more songs to this playlist just to really, get dramatic for a dramatic effect. Okay, so I'm on the Lord Our God, which is song 5 of our playlist. But what I'm going to do is press play over in Ableton. So let's show you Ableton and ProPresenter, and then we'll cut back into ProPresenter here in a second. There we go. Okay. Ableton and ProPresenter, I'm going to press play. What's going to happen is we're going to go to playlist 1, which is not very dramatic, so we have one playlist. We're going to jump up to song 1. Let me confirm. Yep, song 1. And then we're going to go through those slides there. And let's turn this on so that as Ableton plays, you'll see those slides happen. Okay, slide changes happen. Okay, here we go.
Intro 2,
So back
3,
to ProPresenter.
4.
Okay, so you saw it jumped up to You Keep Coming After Me. And let me sneak and clear all real quick. Okay, here comes
Verse
slide 1.
2, 3, 4.
When my heart is
And I'll let it run just for a second so you can watch these keys happen.
and I cry for help.
Here comes slide 2.
Will you hear me?
And one thing that's nice about this is that was a little late, so I'm just going to nudge this over, okay? And then let's play it one more time.
Will you hear me? And you keep coming after me. Oh,
And then you can see we cleared slide. Now that was pretty dramatic because I have no effect or transition programmed in, but you could see I could spend time and get those lyrics exactly right. I could have clear all commands, clear lyrics, backgrounds, whatever, right when I need to, but I'm getting that laid in just exactly where I need it to be, which is great. Cody, any questions at this point?
Yeah, I don't know if you've worked with Planning Center setlist imports at all, or Planning Center playlists, but have you ever tried using MIDI with a Planning Center playlist? Do you know how, if that works? Personally, I haven't, so I don't even know.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it does, but
I should have. Someone asked me this question, and I can't remember her name, a couple weeks ago. She emailed me and said, hey, does this work with Planning Center playlist? And I said, I'd never tried it. And as I was preparing for this webinar, I thought, you know what, I should try that and see if it works. And I did not. You go ahead.
As I said, my assumption would be it would work because they are very similar. If it doesn't work, let us know, because then we can make sure it does work in the future. But my assumption is it does work that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. That's the benefit of being on this webinar with the guy that can make the magic happen. You just say it, and the developers do it. It's powerful.
And then someone asked, if you have headers in your playlist, do they count as an item? So if you're choosing your item, like your playlist item.
Yeah. Let's find out. I've never added headers to my playlist, which I didn't even know you could do that. Look at that. I'm learning something on this webinar. So let's try this real quick and we'll test.
Yeah, I sent a Slack message while you were to try and figure that out to someone, because I've never tested it with a header before, so that would be a unique scenario for me too.
Yeah, so let's try this really quickly. Okay, so I'm gonna move worship down here. You keep coming after me. Should still be item 1. So let me press play and see what it does. So if the header counts, then this isn't gonna work.
Intro. 2, 3, 4.
Looks like it counts. Yeah.
Okay.
So whoever asked that, header does count. So now you keep coming after me. Yeah. You keep coming after me would have to change to item 2 to be able to trigger that in this scenario. Yeah.
And that makes sense because it is literally an item in the playlist.
Yeah. And that's probably that's a great feature when I think about it from like a venue producer perspective or service program director or whatever perspective. Is you could be looking at ProPresenter with like a run a show basically, or on stage display, and see those headers like call to worship is next or whatever, and trigger that from Ableton, which is super, super helpful and handy.
Yeah, thanks for pulling up that.
Yeah, great question.
Cool. Those were the only 2 questions I've seen recently.
Sweet. Cool. Okay. So let me show you a couple things and then explain why in the world I have all these different tracks loaded in, and then show you a couple other fancy things that we can do here. So back over into Ableton Live. Again, what I've added in 4 types of cues so far. I've added in a select playlist item, slide 1, slide 2, and then clear slide command. Now, one of the things I talk about this often, one of the things I do, and I call this a Will Doggett best practice, is I like to keep my different types of cues in different tracks. And the reason is you're going to do this, you're going to be in rehearsal, a cue is going to be off, and you're not going to know what it is. You're not going to, you're going to be stressed or whatever. You need to, as quickly as possible, figure out what's wrong and fix it. So what I do is I leave everything in its separate tracks so that I can see, okay, here's all my select playlist item cues. Here's my trigger slide cues. Here's my clear commands. So if I zoom out really quickly and like my slide disappears when it shouldn't in verse 1, I automatically know clear commands. Oh, that's it. Delete. Right? And I can solve that really quickly. Now, if you get stressed out by this, take advantage of, and this is what I do once I'm done. I take all of these commands, I select them all. So I take the top one, hold shift, click the bottom one, do Command G to create a group. And then I typically rename this, which is Command R, and I'll call this like ProPresenter cues. And then I can close that up. So I don't have to see that at all. Like as I'm playing, again, another pet peeve of mine is people have these crazy Ableton Live sets, but then when you look at it, it's just so overwhelming and it's super stressful. So what I suggest and tell people to do is like clean up your set, make it look super easy to read, easy to follow, super easy to troubleshoot in the moment. And so by grouping those cues, that really helps. Another thing I did here that I want to point out specifically as you dig into this is what I've found is ProPresenter responds best when I send monophonic MIDI as opposed to polyphonic. Monophonic is one note at a time as opposed to multiple notes at a time. And again, Cody, maybe this is something you could ask the developers for like clarification. But what I found is if I do this, sometimes ProPresenter doesn't get like that second note, or struggles to find which note to get. So what I found is just stagger those notes. Even if I did this, it's 100% all the time going to trigger and it's going to work perfectly. And what you may be saying is like, but Will, at the start of this song, I have a video and I need it to be on select playlist 1. Perfect. Here's what I do. I go to the beginning of the song, Command I, which inserts silence, add 1 bar, hit OK, basically create some pre-roll here, and then add locator. I'm going to move this to here and then select playlist item to here and then slide 1 to here so that right when I get to this point, slide 1 is going to hit right at that section. So it's going to pre-roll, pull up what I need. Right when you hear click,
Intro.
boom, it's going to start that kind of pre-roll section there, which is great. Another thing I want to show you guys before we start to land the plane here. Again, I mentioned when I was talking about this, the ability to have freedom and flexibility when we're programming, and freedom and flexibility as we're kind of working throughout our set and skipping lyrics. So let me demo this. I'm going to create a problem, and then we're going to talk about how to solve this, okay? So let's pull up ProPresenter and Ableton so you can see both of these side by side. And I'm going to press play. All right, and then I'm going to, after slide 2 here, I'm going to jump back to the verse, and let's watch what happens, okay? So let's press play and listen for a second. So far everything ProPresenter-wise is working. It's going to queue up our slides. We'll get through this, and then I want to come back and repeat this verse. There we go, that worked. Okay, so this is going to be a weird transition, but let's skip verse 2 and let's go back to verse 1, 3, 4. Okay. So Ableton skipped there, but what happened? Let me show you in ProPresenter. What slide is pulled up? None slide. No slides are pulled up. If you look over at Ableton, it's pretty easy to kind of figure out why. Take a look at this slide cue. So what I did is I jumped back using what's called a locator. I jump back to this place in the set, but look what this place in the set is. So this is the start of the verse, you can see right there. But the lyric, starts before then, and I have this slide cue start before then. So if I jump here, that slide cue is not going to trigger. But alas, no need to fear. If you're going to do that and you want to pre-program your Ableton set for complete freedom, here's what you do. Take your slide cue. You can either copy this, or another fun kind of Ableton programming tip is hold Alt Option and drag, okay? And that's going to duplicate the clip, okay? Now I have a clip here, and I have a clip here. Now, what's nice about this is ProPresenter's super smart. It's not going to trigger this slide again. Even if I have a transition like a dissolve, if I play this slide again, just normal, and I'll show you in a second, it's not going to trigger it twice. Once the slide's up, it's up. It's going to ignore this command. But because of where this command is, if I go to repeat, once I jump back to that place, it's going to trigger the right slide. So let's play it one more time. Let's put both of these up side by side and watch what happens now. Okay, so slide 1. And you see we had that cue twice, but it didn't trigger twice. Now for the sake of time, let's get past slide 2, then I'm going to quickly jump us back. Okay, so I'm going to jump back here. And you can see that slide pulled back up. So if I go back to the ProPresenter, you see we have the correct slide there. And again, the benefit of that and the cool thing about that is with that, we can skip anywhere in our song and our lyrics are going to follow. And one other thing that's really cool that I'll show you over in Ableton is I could take this section. This is going to be another one of those worth the price of admission tips, kids. Ableton is all about flexibility. It's all about freedom and flexibility. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to do Command-Shift-D, which is going to duplicate time. And what I also duplicated were all those MIDI notes. So I just doubled our first verse. And now if I play this, now I didn't edit the audio, obviously, so it still sounds weird. But you can see all my lyrics follow perfectly. So what's really cool about that is I have that freedom and flexibility, whether I've pre-programmed for it, whether I jump in the moment, or if we're in rehearsal and really quickly. Here's a pro tip. If you're a music director, like you're not necessarily the person in charge and you're working underneath a worship leader or someone else, the quickest way for you to become a linchpin in that organization is to make edits very quickly in rehearsal, even to the point that the longer you work with someone, you'll kind of know what edit they're going to make it happen right away and do it. And I've been in multiple situations where a worship leader said, hey, let's repeat the bridge. And I go, okay. And they're like, we'll make the change afterwards. And I say, no, we're good. And they look at me like, what? And in that moment, I win them over because I've set us up on a platform that's completely flexible, completely stable, and done it in a very efficient way, which is really, really cool. One other thing I want to mention here, throw any questions you guys have in the chat, and then we'll see where we are. One other thing I want to mention here is what happens when I come back to do this song 3 weeks from now. So like what Cody mentioned is once I get this Ableton set programmed, then it's done. Like these cues are done. I never have to come back and redo these cues. But what if 3 weeks from now, You Keep Coming After Me is no longer song 1? What if it's, let's go over here. What if it becomes song 4? This is really easy to do. There's 2 ways to approach this. I'm going to show you the way that most of us, I think, are going to handle this. Is all I'm going to do over in Ableton is I'm going to figure out, okay, what song is this in ProPresenter now? See the select playlist item 1 cue? I'm just going to go here and do select playlist item. Let's say it's song 4. I'm going to drop that in. That song's done. I don't have to reprogram it. Now, all I have to make sure of is over in ProPresenter that this is actually song 4. So now 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're good to go. Now that's how most of us are going to handle this. The other approach, if any of you happen to be on here and you're, let's say you're in a situation where you're like in a traveling band, when those can exist again, and you're going around to different churches to lead worship, and you maybe have a repertoire of like 30 songs. And this applies to worship leaders that are maybe at churches that are doing things maybe a little more spontaneously. And at any point the worship leader says, let's sing this out. And they start singing some random song that you didn't plan on. What you could do is build what I call a master set in Ableton Live of all your songs. Go over to ProPresenter and build a master set of all your songs. And then each command in Ableton is going to stay with a specific command in ProPresenter. So what I would do over in ProPresenter, for instance, is always leave my songs in the same exact order. As we get a new song, we add it to the list. We could have up to 127 songs. 127 songs we have programmed in Ableton Live as well too. And then what's really cool about that is at any point the worship leader says, I don't know if you guys remember this old song, Blessed Be Your Name. Let's sing this out. You go to Blessed Be Your Name in your Ableton set. That's always going to be song 62. You press play, it's song 62 over in ProPresenter, and you've got lyrics right on the fly. Again, if you want to keep your job as a music director or win someone's over from I was about to say approval, which is something we shouldn't do from a biblical perspective, but we're not seeking the approval of man, but we are trying to keep our job. And if you want to be able to do that and win people over to your abilities, that's like go anywhere, repeat a section, go to any song. And I'm also going to trigger lyrics for you at the same time, which is insanely, insanely powerful, which is really, really cool. Cool. Cody, any questions? Anybody drop anything in the chat?
I know you kind of just showed this, but someone asked, can you quickly show the process of copying your cues to the rest of the song? Like for instance, you completed verse 1. How do you copy those cues to other verse 1s in the song?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I showed earlier how to do a edit time command. The way you get there is the edit menu, and you see we have cut, copy, duplicate, delete, but we also have cut time, paste time, duplicate time, and delete time. So I use delete time, I use duplicate time, which duplicated the verse. But let's say that let's do a chorus, for example, because I think all these choruses are the same. I'm just really quickly gonna say this is slide 6. Let's get this in the right place. Say this is slide 6, slide 7, and slide 8, and then slide 9. Okay. Pro tip when copying, copy from locator to locator. Okay, let's see if I can zoom in here. So copy from locator to locator, and you're going, but Will, you missed this. It's okay. I'm going to copy these notes. Okay. Let's go over to our second chorus, and then I'm going to paste, and I'm just going to drag that intro out. Okay. And then let's go to another chorus here. The slow chorus, I'm going to paste. I'm going to drag that out. And big chorus, because we've got to have a low chorus and a big chorus. And drag that out. So now what's cool about that is I just programmed all my choruses, and I only had to do that one time. Now, again, that works, depending on how stage display is set up, you may want to actually make a chorus 5, 6, 7, 8, and then chorus 10, 11, 12, 13, chorus blah, 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 blah. That's possible. But this is a really like quick way to get going, quick way to program your entire song. And what I'll mention too, and that's a great question, whoever asked that, but what I'll mention too is I have found that it takes you, once you get started, I mean, it might take you 30 minutes to program a song. As you do it, the time decreases. And then going back to what Cody said at the beginning, you do it once and it's done. You never have to touch it again. So you end up with a repertoire of like 50 songs and you just literally build your set. I can show you how to build an Ableton set in 5 minutes and you're ready to go, which is really cool.
Yeah. And then lastly, you mentioned that you were going to cover a hardware that you could use with MIDI.
Oh, yes. All right, Cody, you got to watch the clock for me on this one because I could go on.
It's already 4:17, so
that's
as fast as it.
It's the Will Dog it way, so I'll go.
5:17.
Yeah, I'll go as quickly as possible. So 3 devices I want to show you that are going to make this happen. One, what happens if Ableton goes down and it's triggering ProPresenter? If you don't have a backup plan, then as my friend Jeremy says, everything just goes black. We don't want that to happen. So a way around that is using something like this. This is called the Play Audio 12 for My Connectivity. Okay, it has 2 inputs, computer 1, computer 2. We run both of these at the same time. I can either manually switch this with a foot switch or I can have it automatically switch. So if computer 1 stops, it automatically runs over to computer 2. When we recorded this live album, this is what we use so that this is called creating a redundant setup. This is what we use to make sure everything worked. Like we didn't want to hope. I always tell people hope is a terrible backup plan. So have a plan. As far as boxes, these guys also for My Connectivity, this is the Mio XM. This has 4 DIN ports in and out. You can connect up to 8 USB MIDI devices. So those Korg Nano controllers we all use for keys, you can connect that. We can do RTP MIDI here, and we can connect directly to a computer. We can connect up to 12 computers with this guy on the same box. And then here's another one. The Mio XL, this is the Mac Daddy. We can connect up to 22 computers over Ethernet. The reason these guys are really cool is I can put one of these on my network and basically connect my computers to that device as opposed to network MIDI. And then I just shut my computers down. I walk away. I come back next week, boot them back up, and they automatically connect and talk to each other. Plus, if I pair it with a Play Audio 12, then I get fully redundant MIDI. So even if my playback rig goes down, I keep MIDI notes going to ProPresenter, which is really cool. And if you really want to get fancy, run a second ProPresenter machine into an ATEM, and then you could also trigger that as well too. But again, that's Will gone beyond our time already. So, but yeah, lots of possibilities there, which is really cool.
No, this is great. I think really you did a great job. If anyone has questions, you're welcome to keep posting them. But we'll probably answer them via comments later, or you can always reach out from Studio to Stage. We'll be willing to help. But I know that he's also doing a giveaway today, so a lot of you are here for that too as well, so that you can be a part of his, get a 1 year to his membership on his website, which is an incredible resource. So, yeah.
All right, here we go. So yes, thank you, Cody. As a reminder, if you want to download these cues here from studiostage.com/ProPresenter, but we do have a giveaway, and I'm gonna do this the only way I know how, which is to use a MIDI controller. And I'm going to press play, and it is going to randomly, this was not picked beforehand, pick a name via MIDI. All right, press play, and our name is, drum roll please, Ableton drum roll please. Thank you. Our name is Becky Hopkins. Becky Hopkins from Virginia. You have won a 1-year subscription to From Studio to Stage, which is going to get you access to over 35 courses, lots and lots of downloads and templates and community, monthly call, all that sort of fun stuff. So Becky, I'm going to reach out via email. And if I get an email from a guy named Tom who's claiming to be Becky Hopkins, I'm not going to respond because you are in fact not Becky Hopkins. But Becky, congratulations to everyone that registered. Thanks for registering. And yeah, there you go. Congrats, Becky.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a good job. Thank you everyone for joining us. It's been fun. Make sure to leave your comments and ask more questions, and we'll get around to them. I appreciated learning some of this myself. it's one of those things where like there's so much flexibility in what you can do with it, but it requires some programming on the front end to get you to that point. And I think it's definitely worth it. In the end, it opens up room for volunteers to learn more things, more opportunities for volunteering, but also takes away the responsibility of a volunteer running slides and it being off, being behind. I know a lot of us struggle with maybe the person's not clicking the slide at the right time. This takes care of that for you. And so it's a huge opportunity to be able to use to MIDI for that. Great job, Will. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has
loved
been
having you.
super fun. Yeah.
That's good. All right. Thank you all. We'll see you next time on our next webinar. If you have any more questions for Will, if you want to join his product, definitely go to fromstudiotostage.com and he will take care of you. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Cody. Bye, everybody. Take care.
Yeah.